Thanks. Good morning, everybody. I hope I'm not too loud. Let's see how it goes. So great to see everybody here and great to see this fantastic conference come to life. As has just been said, just to introduce myself a little bit, my name is Niall Lavery. I am on the screen here, as you can see. And if it's possible, sorry, the prompt screen has just gone black with no signal. But I spent 25 years doing a lot of different work with large brands across the world. If you haven't heard of our company, Veriteer, that's probably because most of what we do is confidential and we're not allowed to talk about it. But I will share some stories today from some of the brands that you see on the screen and talk about those in the context of customer insight that we're going to delve into a little bit today. So at Veriteer, we do a variety of different solutions for brands, things like customer loyalty, world building, and none of the solutions that we offer to these brands would be possible without customer data and customer insight. So a lot of the fundamental work that we do with these brands is helping them get a handle on, just like you heard, who is their customer, what do they like to do, and how do you translate that into action. So just jumping straight in, I'm going to start with a little story.
This is Brad. Brad is the youngest in a family deeply rooted in their village, running a beloved corner store, a place where exceptional service meets warmth and familiarity. Here, personal connections are cherished, trust is built, and community needs are met. As the years pass, the family builds on their success and expands into more stores and then mega stores. But when it's time for Brad to take over from their father, they realise that their big automated stores have broken the customer relationships and personal connections that their success was built on. In an attempt to bridge the gap, the innovative Brad introduced a loyalty programme to help reconnect with customers. This helps, but it's still not like it used to be. Then, a breakthrough. New online platforms revolutionise Brad's approach, and a seamless transition between the physical and digital world begins. Brad's new mobile app and e-commerce platform can use analytics to fuel personalised experiences. Yet, as customer communities evolve, so must Brad. New identities, needs, and relational patterns emerge. Supported by the emergence of AI and immersive channels, Brad moves into our final age of insight and finally brings the best of the corner store into their new global business. Understanding customers like never before and seamlessly blending into customers' lives, Brad supports and therefore contributes to shaping the communities of the future. Be like Brad.
So the story of Brad that you just heard there is a very common story for large established brands. So a lot of the organizations we work with are very big and have been around for a very long time. And over the last 100 years, brands like IKEA, Aldi, C&A, and those very established bricks and mortar to online retailers have gone through that cycle. So if we break that down, we have what we call 5 ages of insight that those brands have gone through. Starting off generally with small format stores, where you've had this really deep relationship with the customers. You not only know your customer, you know their family, right? You know their friends. You're able to offer that one-to-one service, and you can do things like offer individual personal credit through into scale-ups when they've started to see growth in the business enabled by technology, automation, and scale. So moving to big stores, automated point of sale. And what they found is that as you move into these big supermarkets and superstores, you lose all connection with the customer. Your retail experience becomes like a machine. It's very functional, and it may offer a bigger range and lower price, but you lose that ability to know your customer and engage with your customer. So the reaction to that was the introduction of things like loyalty schemes. So loyalty schemes, I'm talking about things like Starbucks Rewards, Walmart Plus, IKEA Family, these schemes that help consumers be nice little robots and identify themselves every time they make a purchase so that you can start to understand who's buying what, when, and where. But what it doesn't tell you is why. So why are people doing this? Who are the individuals behind the purchase? And therefore, loyalty schemes only take you so far and allow you some opportunity to do promotional sales development, but they never achieve that deeply personal insight that you had before. Now, the fourth age of insight is over the last 20 years when organizations have had the ability to have apps, to have e-commerce, and be able to track and understand things in a much deeper way, and to be able to engage customers in conversations to generate that lovely zero-party data that helps people understand who are you, what do you do, and why does it matter. So for a lot of the brands in the room, I would imagine this is where you started, right? As an e-commerce only brand, you already know that there's lots of ways to kind of track and analyze what people do, and from that, infer what they want to do and help them achieve that. And where we're moving, and what I'll talk about in a little bit then, is automated retail, the fifth age of insight, where not only do you have these kind of low-level points of data on your customers and their purchasing behaviors, but you can go way beyond that. Okay, and social, like Michael talked about earlier on, is a big part of that in terms of engaging people beyond the brand and understanding who and what they want to do. So why were corner stores the ideal back then? Two things. The first thing is that they had proximity to the voice of the customer. So you could actually talk to your customers every day. You understood what they wanted to do, who they were, what they were trying to achieve, and that gave you depth of contextual insight. Not only what they bought, but why, right? How often, whether they wanted repeat, etc. And you had the ability to benchmark because you were able to compare multiple customers in the same demographic, the same space, and you were quite small to be able to do that. The second thing is proximity to decision making. So the person that ran the store was the person that was serving the customer, but also the person that was making the decision for what to stock, how to price, how to communicate, who to engage with. And in the background, there was a lot of market context that's relevant to this as well. So there was very limited competition. As a corner store, people couldn't easily go to Amazon, right? That's changed now. The consumer, the customer is empowered to be able to make choices and has so many options online and in store that they didn't have before. They had a highly engaged community where the retailer was part of that community and not just a service provider for people. But at the same time, there were strong limitations in terms of the range that you could offer. So we just heard from GeoPost around the importance of range and availability to the modern customer. Back in those days, the supply chains, storage, nothing existed to allow you to have this extended range availability. And you had no economies of scale. So corner stores were great in terms of the personal experience that you had, but they also had fundamental problems in driving growth. And that's why organizations have gone through those 5 or 4 so far ages of insight to get to where they are to today. So for an organization that has started in this fourth age of insight, where you have social, you've got analytics, you've got web, mobile, in-store experiences, and all of these different interactions with your customer, well, what's a simple way to try and make sure that you have proximity to voice of customer and proximity to decision making so that you can establish a strong customer relationship? So there's a little simple framework that we use called practical personalization. And I'll give you a high over on it now, and then we can follow up later on if anybody wants to get into more detail. So the first thing that we look at with organizations and some of those big brands that I just talked about is about capability. How capable are you of understanding your customer and being able to do something about that? And there's 3 questions. And we start with action. We call this action back. So what can you do? What are the variables that you have in your organization that you can actually personalize for your customer? And this is a fundamental misunderstanding I think a lot of organizations have. So if we look at the things that you can flex, can you flex your range, channel, content, price versus service level, promotions or experience? And not all brands can do all of these things, right? There are lots of reasons that a brand may not be able to do it. If you're a small D2C brand, you can't immediately scale your range, right? I've only got 4 things that I can sell. Well, how do I build a long-term customer relationship around these 4 things that people may only want to buy once a year, once every 2 years? That's a real constraint. Similarly, if I go down to things like promotions, if you're an everyday low price retailer, which is very common in the Baltics, right? I don't have the flexibility to be able to offer promotions within my customer offer. But there are opportunities as well. And the opportunities that are enabled by digital and e-commerce largely. So with range, that's why big retailers, even with substantial assortments at the minute, are extending into marketplace, looking at things like drop ship. How can I take my 4 products, build that offer out around that without having to build the infrastructure to have another 100 products and extend beyond that? AI is a huge enabler then for being able to drive more engaging content, talk to people in different channels in different ways, whether that's conversational commerce or whether it's simply being able to offer a chatbot online for people to engage with. So once you understand what you can do, what are the variables in your organization that you can flex, then you got to figure out, well, what is it possible for me to know about my customer that will tell me how to flex for each individual? And for each of those variables, there are some very simple data points that you'll want to understand. So for range, it's category preference and tier preference. So do I want home and gardening? And do I want premium or do I want basic? Right? Some of those things then we'll explore how we get that. But all of these preferences, including things that are more background like disposable income and socio-demographic profiles, are usually what you want to try and know to be able to act. And in order to know these things, you need to also understand some of the complexities around things like households. So individuals do not always buy as an individual. I know myself, the consumption patterns within my household are split between myself, my wife, and my oldest son. Right? So when you want to look at me as an individual and you look at my individual buying patterns, you need to understand that that's only a part of a whole. And some of those things are specific to me, but some of those things are broader and are about us acting as a household, which is in effect your customer. And that's actually quite difficult to ascertain, and that's why loyalty schemes with household profiles and registration can really help unpack that. Another thing then with brands is gatekeepers. So if you sell soft drinks or you sell apparel that's suitable for children, the primary gatekeeper is the parent. Yeah, so there's a variety of different things that you need to understand about your customer and how to determine preference and how you can influence that. But in order to know this, in order to act, you need to be able to get the relevant data. So those are things like shopping history and browsing history, very simple usually, particularly online. More interestingly, interaction history. What do they look at? What do they engage at on my platform, off my platform, and be able to bring that together into a customer profile. Right? I won't go through everything else in detail, but being able to understand this is that combination of zero-party data, first-party data, partner data from marketplaces and other areas that you engage with, and then enriching that with third-party data to try and understand those things like socio-demographic profile that are so useful to be able to inform tier preferences. Okay. Step 2 in this is action planning. So once you understand what you can do, you need to unpack the use cases. So if product recommendations and range extension is what you can do, how exactly can I do that? What are the exact techniques that I can apply? Whether that's customer also bought, recommended for you, whatever those different things are. The scenario might be an enriched browsing experience, and the trials that you'll want to run then might be product listing page carousels, could be interstitial basket pages, whatever those different things are. And each of those scenarios that you design are what enable you to learn based on customer data by flexing those variables I talked about. But most important, and another thing that brands miss often is, well, what are the operations behind this? It's not just a CRO team, right? You're going to need to figure out, well, how do I let the tech do the heavy lifting, right? So there's lots of amazing tech even in the room today that is designed to automate a lot of this process. It can't do everything, but it's really important to invest in the right tech, experiment with the right things, and make it work. The next thing is sustainable talent pipelines. So who understands this stuff, right? So who finds it easy to get data scientists these days, right? Very few people. How do you establish a connection to the relevant talent pools, and how do you pull them into the business and keep them there and make that flow sustainable? Trial management is an absolutely critical element here. So how do you know something's working? Right, well, only through the data. And you can see CRO teams get lost in trials, lost in experimentation all the time. Disciplined trial management and a top-down sanity check are really critical. So how much are you investing in trials? How much are you investing in personalization and experimentation? Well, actually, can we just take a view on, is this turning the dial? Is this showing up in our top and bottom line in any significant way? And if not, maybe it's time to dial it back. But most importantly, it's that combination of proximity to the voice of the customer, which enables the top-down sanity check. If customers aren't loving what you're doing, right, sometimes the data needs to be challenged as well, because it's all in the interpretation. And trying to get your management in the position where, based on the voice of the customer and your data, you're able to make decisions about what to do and empower your teams, particularly if you're international, to make things work. Okay, so now looking forward, right, and I'm trying to keep track of time and see where I'm at. I think I'm okay for the time being. If we then think about the fifth age of insight. So far we've talked about the journey that brands have gone on to get to the point where they are reasonably functioning multi-channel or omni-channel retailers. They have good insight, they've stitched it together, and they've identified which variables they can change, and they've got that operation working. What's going to happen next? The war for customer data has been ongoing for 20 years plus. Now, if we get into things like air miles, we can go way back, many decades before that. But brands across the world have been building walled gardens of consumer data, proprietary customer data about all of us that they hold and they use to exact more reward from the interactions they have with their consumers. And this has exploded over the last decade plus with things like retail media and ad platforms, where the information that the likes of Google or Meta hold about you allows them to monetize ads in a very common way that I'm sure we're all using today. The challenge with the walled gardens is you can't actually get access to that data. So you can use it to target ads on that platform, but you can't bring it into your platform to enrich your existing customer profiles and help you do things on your site. So you are largely constrained in terms of customer insight and personalization to what you know and what you've captured, rather than how your customers have been interacting with your brand on those other platforms. And that's a challenge. But these walled gardens of consumer data are not just social media and search. They cover every element now of life, right? Those social and search were the big ones that started off. Gaming has gone from completely offline console-based games to completely connected, highly engaged streaming platforms. Mobile, health with fitness trackers, with health apps, everything else. Streaming, yeah. So there's a huge amount of activity from the major brands, and this is only a very small selection in each of those areas where they're capturing a huge amount of information about you in that slice. Right, so even if we look at food, Samsung have a product they call Family Hub Plus, which has cameras inside the fridge. It understands what you've bought, how you consume it. It generates ideas for what you can cook with it. It'll automatically connect and send a food order through to major retailers, whether it's Tesco or somebody else. And all of that information that they want is also what Amazon want. This is why Amazon have been investing in things like Amazon Fresh, Whole Foods, various other things, that really incredible insight into who you are, what you eat, how often you shop, what you spend, what does your household look like, what are you allergic to, right? Those pieces of information then allow you to do lots of other stuff. And if we take Amazon as an example, they pop up all over the place here, right? So these walled gardens are both within these particular subsectors, whether it's food, whether it's shopping, delivery. We just heard from Global or GeoPost, FedEx are here, who've launched a new platform where they're trying to build their own walled garden of customer data just earlier this year. Walmart, another one that are investing heavily. So these brands are building up huge volumes, huge data stores on all of us, segmented by area, but segmented by brand. And that's not going to last, right? So if you take an example of a relative newcomer on this page, someone like Walmart, they understand the US consumer probably better than most organizations. They also make that insight available to brands to advertise through their retail media platform on Walmart's shopping experience. That's going to take them so far, but how does Walmart then start to get an insight into what people are watching on streaming platforms or what games they play, when they come into their house, right? So all these remote doorbells and door unlock systems are all fantastic, but do not kid yourself that you are being tracked as to when you come home, when you're in, how many people are in, who shows up. All of that is trapped in a walled garden of data. So what's going to happen, there's 4 key trends that are going to happen in the next 5 years that are going to transform our access to customer data and how we use it. 1, integration. These brands have huge assets in the data here, but they cannot monetize them fully unless you start to join up the different data sets together. And there are only 3 or 4 brands in the world, the likes of Apple, Google, Amazon, who can reliably stitch together sufficient information across these different elements to have a good understanding of who the customer is. And with the investments, the multi-billion-dollar investments that are being made by these brands to build up the walled gardens, it is inevitable that they will need to integrate across brands and share information in a way that unlocks the full asset of that, or the full value of that asset. And that collaboration could be through partnerships, it could be through contra marketing, it could be through a variety of different techniques, but it is inevitable that will happen. 2, new interfaces. So with the introduction of things like immersive interfaces, so extended reality, even neural link, those sorts of techniques, the data points that are able to be captured about us are going to multiply by 1,000-fold, right? At the minute we can track clicks, very soon we can track glances, right? If you think about the new Apple product that's out, it's still very early stage in terms of the market, but augmented reality is going to watch what you watch. And that's going to give you new levels of insight into what you're potentially interested in and where you want to go. And combined with the new interface, you can react in the moment. So those new platforms are only going to work when everybody's at play in the Apple App Store version of extended reality. But the data that's captured is going to explode. All right? I don't even want to think about Neuralink. That's more than 5 years away, but that's going to get really crazy. The third thing that's going to happen is AI, right? AI is already happening. There's a lot of buzz about the LLMs at the minute. Real AI is going to need to go beyond that, but it's the only way that we are going to be able to make sense of all of this data. Even what exists at the minute, the thousands of petabytes of information that these brands have about us and what they think that we do and we want, when that explodes 1,000 times with the introduction of these new interfaces, we are going to need AI to make sense of all of that information. And the investment in the AI sector at the minute is going to deliver on that over the next few years. Right? And those tools, backed up by these integrated walled gardens of data, are going to allow brands to be able to tap into that and do incredible things. And then the fourth trend, the thing that will inevitably also need to happen, is regulation will become updated. Particularly in Europe, GDPR and various other regulatory frameworks are quite restrictive in terms of our ability to share information and to use customer data to drive growth. With this explosion of data, with the investment, with the value attached to it, they're going to need to become updated. And part of that, of course, will be the consumer being empowered to be able to say, well, I know Amazon knows a lot about me. I'm happy to share that for some exchange with other brands to make the most. So those 4 things of integration across walled gardens, new interfaces, the advent of AI, and then updated regulation over the next 5 years will fully transform the environment within which we're working for customer data. And the trick, or the question for all of the brands in the room and all of the brands that we work with is, are you ready? Right? Are you going to be there? What are you doing right now to build those capabilities, right? Those operations, and understand the use cases and the flexibility of what you can do, because this is a huge potential. But if you don't have the ability to flex your price, flex your range, flex your content, flex your service levels, flex your experience, then you can't personalize anything, and you're the dumb one in the room, right? So I think that's the key challenge. So just thinking about time, I think I'm just about up and hopefully have come within time. So we have a stand just down that aisle at the very end. There's a team of us here. The practical personalization framework that I ran through there, if anybody's interested in having the full framework or being able to talk about it, tap me up on LinkedIn, come and talk to us at the stand, visit the website. We're happy to share the framework and everything else, and talk a bit about how our customers who currently have $250 billion of revenue annually are investing in AI personalization, customer insight, and how they're making the most of it and how you can too. So thank you very much. Appreciate the time.